Well, we're back at it again, you Kickstarter degenerates. Another campaign. Where are you? Another campaign has crossed over $1 million US. It's at 1.646834. I mean, might as well finish it up in Canadian. And that means that FOMO is at an all-time high. If you're new to the channel, this is a series that I've been doing for many years. Whenever a campaign raises over $1 million on Kickstarter, I always feel like there is some degree of hype surrounding it. Good or bad, right? Hype can be good, hype can be bad. But I also think with that hype comes the fear of missing out. So this is a series where I put your excitement to the test. I want you to be equally as excited when Terraria comes to your door as you are right now when you're hitting the back button. I don't want you to have buyer's regret. That's essentially what I'm here for. And if you can get through these 5 reasons unscathed, well, then, back it and go and have fun and enjoy the board game. Like, that's what I want. But inevitably, and especially with video game adaptations, there's always going to be some people who don't understand that concept, even though it's at the very beginning of the video. But let's start with what is exciting about Terraria. Terraria, the board game. Now, I didn't really know anything about Terraria before this popped up on my radar, before people clamored in the comments shouting, finally, we have another successful Kickstarter. We haven't been having as many of these $1 million campaigns, and I'm going to take complete ownership of it all being thanks to me, and not because, you've already bought so many games that you now have to work your way through them. Again, you Kickstarter degenerates. But Terraria, the board game, is based upon the video game of the same name, Terraria. Well, it's not called Terraria the board game because it's a video game. You get it. In Terraria, it kind of looks like this. As you run around the land, exploring and conquering new lands, delving into the depths, mining resources, fighting baddies, and throwing your little yo-yo around as you jump around with little angel, or the sword. Oof. I mean, it looks cool. It does look like a fun game, and so there is no doubt an excitement that is behind this campaign as well. And I do like some of the promises. Oh, I'm reading through the updates. I try to read through everything before I make one of these videos. I look at all the updates, I see what they've been doing, I see what the stretch goals are out there, and I see what sort of coverage other people have put on this. And so I have tried to consume basically as much as there is to consume out there about this board game, so that we can distill it all into the rotten tomato of a human that I am. Not having anything to do with the aggregate website, just that's my personality, a rotten tomato. The other thing that I think is really neat about this game is the exploration aspect. I think delving down into different biomes and exploring things. Recently, I had been on a huge kick of Lego Fortnite, and that idea of getting the resources, building up things, is interesting and exciting and gets me excited about the game. But again, not knowing all that much before going into it, I don't have as many things to say about the excitement of it other than, yeah, sure, looks cool. However, I don't think necessarily that something just looking cool is a good enough reason to spend your hard-earned money. I think the bar has to be a little bit higher. For me personally, because I'm very cheap and have no money. And so when I spend money on a game, it's significant, it's important. So I'm going to get right into the 5 reasons you shouldn't back Terraria the board game right now. Strap your little mining pants on and get ready for a ride. And I want to jump into this because number 5 is that video game adaptations of board games are naturally going to be different than the real thing. And I'm putting this front and center as number 5 because I feel like a lot of people have jumped on board because of the IP. An IP is a very powerful thing. It draws in fans of the genre. And there have been many very successful video game specific board game adaptations. There's something about a tactile experience that makes people excited. One of the more successful ones that comes to mind that's just been fulfilling is Slay the Spire, something that I also had a 5 reasons you shouldn't back on, and probably talked about it a little less eloquently than I'm talking now. Not that I'm claiming to be eloquent, but just I've had a couple years to think about and to see more video game adaptations go by. Slay the Spire, by most accounts, is one that is very successful of capturing that deck building experience. But I think also a key to that was that the game was close to a board game to begin with. Dead Cells is another one that was funding on Kickstarter and raised a bunch of money, and this hasn't yet come out, so we don't really have the community reviews. We see the average ratings here, which aren't really anything of significance. We had Deep Rock Galactic, which I mentioned, which I actually thought looked quite neat. Again, it's this sort of sprawling, crawling game that was a little bit reminiscent of Zombicide, but I also recognize that some people watching may not have heard of Zombicide. And if you haven't, well, you should click subscribe, because welcome to the board gaming space. I'm here to hold your hand all the way through it. And if you have, well, then subscribe anyway, because I was lying to those other people. I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm just going to thrust you right into the deep end. But I think the point that I'm attempting to make here, as uneloquently as possible, is that the video game adaptations will inherently be different than their video games, no matter how close they are, how different they are. And I think the closest adaptation, at least what I've seen, in terms of theme, in terms of feel, is potentially Stardew Valley as well. Stardew Valley came out with a board game where you run around and you fulfill errands for your uncle. And people buy into these video game systems and then get it because they're a fan of the thing, and then not realize the key differences that are going to happen once you translate it into board game form. A thing that I love about video games is that they don't take up table space, and you don't have to set them up other than turning on the system that you're going to play. And I find with a lot of video game adaptations, in order to try to remain faithful to the video game, it ends up being a little bit more fiddly than you would like, because you're trying to cram in so much information, you're trying to cram in so many little homages to the game that you love, and because of that, you have to have a card for that. You have to have a different map, right? You have to have something physical to represent all these things that were easy to implement digitally, especially when it comes to like narrative elements, which a lot of larger narrative campaigns kind of go down the rabbit hole. These are things that you have to consider. Although I do really like that in this, if you die, you respawn. You respawn back in the forest, and you have to kind of go progress and move out into another way. And so there's the potential there that if you meet a boss or a minion that just kills you outright, your game isn't over. And so I really do like that idea of respawning, but I can only imagine in an exploration game that being a fairly considerable set. Now, it is very pedestrian, I think, just to say video games are different than board games, but I think that is a key element, especially if we are dealing with, 1,800, almost 1,900 out of the 8,557, almost 2,000 of these. A cool 22%, let's call it. Just guessing. And now I need to know. 1881 divided by 8,557 is 21.98%. Look at that math this guy pulled out. You got to listen to me for a little bit longer. When you have essentially 22% of the audience who might be approaching this game for the first time and just backing based upon the love of the video game, I think that is really great, and it is a potentially a really great game to welcome you into the board gaming hobby. But I also want to be the one to manage your expectations and make sure that you are completely informed as to how this thing will play. And to think about the fiddliness, and to think about the length of the conversation, and to think about your attention span as well, in terms of how you engage with Terraria, which for me with video games is an entire day and then never again for 2 months, and go through that cycle. The how you will enjoy this thing, I think, is important to take a step back and to check your excitement and to consider. And I think that's important to bring up because it is specifically a video game IP. Now, reason number 4 is a tricky one. Reason number 4 has to deal with the inherent risk of backing on Kickstarter. And this is for both new and old backers. There was a video out there by the King of Average that my patrons sent me. They said, "Whoa, Chris, you got to include this in the 5 reasons," talking about the companies behind Terraria. There's a company there's a person who's in charge of Paper Fort Games that also has another company, Stone and Sword Games, or Stone Sword Games, who cares, that put out this game, Senjutsu Battle for Japan. And in that video, there was some sort of righteous anger. And let me be clear, I think righteous anger is a good thing when it is on behalf of the consumers, and it certainly seemed to be directed mostly in that regard, although I think the reasons that this video put forward were a little bit unfounded from my perspective. But the salient point, not to rehash that whole thing, the salient point was that Kickstarter has risk. It was sort of putting that risk into perspective, saying, what if these companies are insidious, let's say? What if they're raising money for this so that they can finish delivering on this? Again, that felt a little bit not the case, because if you look at the updates of things that happened and were posted before that video was even posted, they said that they're on wave 2 of a 3-wave shipping process. There were a bunch of delays apparently with this Kickstarter, but that's just crowdfunding. There are going to be a bunch of delays. Now, there also are going to be some companies out there who will take your money and run. For me, having looked through 2,000 campaigns over the last 3 years, I just hit my 2,000th campaign covered in the Monday episode where I look at every single game and read through all the rule books. It's called Crowdfunding Countdown. I don't see necessarily evidence of that insidious behavior. The idea was put forward that this person has started a new company because this one hasn't delivered, and Kickstarter won't let you start another campaign if one hasn't delivered. I mean, they do let companies do that all the time. Anyway, I don't want this section to be a whole long time. But those are the Coles notes, which I'm addressing specifically because my patrons were interested in my take on it. I think there's a lot of companies out there who have different company names. I don't think that's necessarily a specific red flag. It depends on the people behind it. If you know the people behind it are actually shady and have stolen your money, like Golden Bell, for example, if you've ever heard that name. There are bad actors out there, and I think it's important to follow those names specifically. I think this sort of reads to me as somebody who started a company and promised the world and then realized they were doing it all by themselves, and there were a lot of issues and people were upset because they thought it was more than just one person desperately trying to give off the appearance that they are running a successful company, as most board game companies are. I think the main reason for this distinction of Paperfork Games existing as its own sort of separate entity seems to be that they are more interested in producing lighter games. And even though I found Senjutsu reading through the rulebook to be fairly light as it is, very low on the complexity scale in my opinion, but that is sort of the mandate that they have said that they've put forward. And I think that there are a number of examples of companies who have done this, from Burnt Island and KTBG. They have a more complex, more family. There's Awaken Realms Light. That's easier to compare because this Awaken Realms Light, because they wanted to use Awaken Realms brand to push things forward. To Ravensburger and Aliyah. This has been a precedent that's been set before that hasn't been shady, and I think it actually would give me more faith because the company is operating independently, as long as there are other things that were created, and because this isn't just a brand new thing, but they have had a previous game that was backed and is on shelves and is widely available in retail, that gives me a little bit more weight to this not just being a shell game scheme, personally. But now that that's out of the way, I do think that there is an inherent risk into backing things at Kickstarter. Kickstarter says whenever you purchase that it is not a store. Kickstarter does not provide you any protections. And the reason why this series exists, it is to put your excitement to the test. Like, if I am actively excited about a game and excited enough to back, I am excited enough that if it takes an extra 2 years to get to my door, I won't care. I mean, I'll be disappointed, but I won't care because I'm still excited about that thing. My excitement won't change. If it needs additional development in that time, again, won't change because I am excited about that thing. If shipping costs increase like they have done in the past, won't care because it is worth it to me to purchase now. It is worth it to pay a little bit extra because I am in love with this game so much. That is my personal philosophy on backing, and I think that is important to recognize. And I think so many people get burned by Kickstarter because they don't recognize the differences between this and retail. If you want to just go to a retail store and pick up a game, you can do that. With Kickstarter, it's not that guaranteed of a deal, and a lot of people fail to recognize that. And I think that is where a lot of the anger and resentment comes from, for sure. I think if you were promised one thing, which Kickstarter always does, and then fails to deliver on that thing, which Kickstarter always does in terms of shipping times and actually getting anything to your door, everything on Kickstarter is generally delayed. That can sour a person, right? I'm still waiting on part 2 of a game that I backed in 2019. That's Trudvang Legends. I still haven't gotten these tokens that I want to use while playing with the game. And so again, to newer backers or older backers, there is that inherent risk in purchasing a Kickstarter, and that is why your excitement needs to be so high. These things will occur, whether we like them or not, they will occur. I'm not saying that they should occur. It would be great if they didn't occur, but they will occur. We need to expect these things, and you learn to expect these things once you've existed in the space for a long while. So I share that sentiment of righteous anger for the consumers very significantly in a way that I want you to have a good experience. I want the board gaming hobby to grow, and I want you to get everything. I want you to get the game of your dreams. I really, really do. I want you to have countless evenings of fun and frivolity, and I don't want Kickstarter to sour that experience. I can absolutely relate to that feeling, and I think that feeling of protectiveness is what also creates this series. And so I think it is a good thing to talk about, even if I think the reasoning in that other particular video wasn't quite as founded as it could be, or as condemning as it may first seem. So let's move on to number 3. Let's talk about the game. Finally, let's talk about the game. Number 3 has to do with the idea of action optimization, and I bring this forward because that's kind of what they talk about a little bit in the how to play section. Players take turns simultaneously, draw cards from your personal deck, and plan with your teammates how best to spend the action points generated. You have a limited amount of times. A lot of games do this. You have a limited amount of times to do a certain amount of stuff, and you have to figure out how to properly optimize together in order to win the game. This will be the core gameplay loop of the game. This will be where you will find the fun or you won't. A core element to that cycle, right? I always think about games in terms of gameplay loops and how you find the fun, and this is all to do with action points. If you've ever played Pandemic and you liked it, well, you're good, you're close. If you like having a wide dearth of options to choose from on your turn and then narrowing those things down. And I bring this up, that might seem like all board games, that might seem like a weird point to bring up, but I bring this up, and the reason I'm bringing this up is tied to reason number 1, so keep watching to that. But I bring this up because, again, of that difference between the video game and not. I suppose in the video game you probably have a day tracker. I assume you have a day tracker, you have to manage your resources a little bit, but from what I've watched, it kind of just seems like you run around mining a whole bunch of stuff and using those resources. Like, I would think of this more as a resource management game if I were approaching this from the video game feel and that video game perspective. And it doesn't seem that way. It seems like an action efficiency game because you have a timer. You have to complete these sort of 4 paths or 1 path on easy mode. So yes, 4 paths, because we're not dumb idiot babies. We're going to go super hard right from the get-go and get our little bottom spanked and enjoy it. We're going to grossly underestimate our actions and the amount of time we have left and try to attempt to defeat this wall of flesh as our Death Star run. Although I suppose you'd have to explore and find that wall of flesh first. And so I think that idea here is where it jars a bit for me in terms of what I have perceived from the video game and what the board game experience is actually giving you. It's giving you more of an optimization puzzle of how much time do we spend on pursuing these quest chains? How much time do we spend pursuing this or that, and when do we have to pivot to achieve our other goals? That's the story and that's the feeling that it's giving you. And I feel in Terraria feels like the video game feels like much more of an open sandbox style where you're exploring, you're crafting, you're doing the Minecraft thing, and I don't know if the action point or action efficiency or optimization necessarily represents that in feel, right? And so that's just why I want to flag it as a core gameplay element from what I've seen. Number 2 also deals with mechanics, and this one is specifically is if you don't like random elements in your game. From what I have seen, there's going to be a lot of randomness in here because every part of the map is explorable, right? Not deplorable, explorable. Or although it could be that too, who knows? You're going to randomly shake up these different biomes, and then when you explore away from the woods, you're going to find one of them. Oh, you now found the frost biome, and then you might find the desert biome. And so exploring all these different paths, presumably each of these biomes will have different chests and different resources you can mine as well. And so you're going to have to go and figure out which way to go, explore, going to have to dig down, find a chest, go through these 86 unique biome tiles, find these 30 chest cards, or these 200 action and debuff cards. I mean, if that's 100 for each person, you've got to discover these, right? 167 equipment cards that you're uncovering, 64 consumable cards. I feel the randomness in this game is going to be very high. And that's why I brought up Stardew Valley at the beginning, is because that was one of the concerns that sort of skewed people's opinion of this. For example, there's a place where you go fishing, and to do some certain objectives, you have to fish. You have to catch the right fish. But because you're fishing, you're just drawing fish out of a bag and hoping you get the fish that matches with your objective. It's just kind of randomness, the board game. And while I think Terraria hopefully has learned lessons to make such a non-fun experience change, and it seems more tied into the type of equipment you can, and in it, again, tying into that action efficiency, I think the randomness here is going to be very significant. I think that's also why they are considering this more of a family game, and which is why it might be a great game if you're just getting into board gaming. I think if you're new to board gaming, randomness is not a bad thing. I think if you're more entrenched in the board gaming hobby, you start to crave a little bit more mechanical depth. And that randomness and the randomness of the events starts to wear a little bit thin. I'll give an example. I just played the game Western Legends for the first time, and this is a game that's super highly rated, 281. This is a sandbox style game where you're exploring around town and you can do pretty much anything. You can wrestle cattle, you can rob banks, you can shoot each other, duel each other, and everything kind of gets you points. It was a very thematic, fun, zany experience that I thoroughly enjoyed and do not need to play again for like 3 years, right? I feel like I've seen it. I've seen what the game offers. I really had a very fun time playing it, and I do not need to play it to death. I think Terraria could fall into a similar category of games where you play it once and you're like, yeah, that was a fun little random experience. Let's play it again to see how the different biomes move. And you play it again, you say, oh, the different biomes moved, and I saw these different cards in these chests. But the more you play it, the more that shine of the random elements kind of falls off. And I think that's just important to flag, and I think that shine falls off sooner the more games that you have under your belt. And this isn't shade to however many games you've played or however many you haven't, but at this point in time in my life, I have played a lot of games. I've read through even more rule books, at least 2,000 of them, and you see the sort of same tricks and same things, and you find what you like and you find what you enjoy, right? Experience lets you know what you enjoy the more you get into it. And if you're new to the board gaming hobby, I don't think you have to worry about this whatsoever. I think if you think about your favorite games, there will probably be a fun element of randomness to it. And I think the joy of this game can also come from that exploration, right? That feeling of exploration and that feeling of discovery. I think that might be a great thing. I think if you are newer to the hobby, again, don't worry about it. But I think if you are like a veteran gamer, I might take a pass on this one. At least that is to the best of my knowledge. Or a veteran gamer who hates randomness, I should say. I might take a pass to this. And that's to the best of my knowledge. That's the best of my knowledge right now. And that's why I was reading this latest update to see if anything had changed. It certainly hasn't on this one, because number one, and I'm going to come back to you for this because it's so important, and honestly, I don't really need any more visual aids, because number one is that there is no rule book on the page. There is a incredible lack of information presented on the page in this campaign. An offensive lack of information, actually. And they say that there's going to be a rulebook, and they say that there's going to be a playthrough, but it hasn't appeared yet. So why are you backing? Just straight up. Why are you backing when you haven't seen what the game has to offer? All you're doing right now is you're backing on a promise, right? You're backing on a hope. And as we learned in tip number 4, reason number 4, that's how people get disillusioned with Kickstarters. You back on a hope, you hope that it's going to be good, you don't do your due diligence, you don't look into it if it's actually going to be good for you. And unfortunately, Terraria is not providing you the tools to look into if it's going to be good for you or not. I think it's great that they're adopting a bunch of cool animals. They adopted an orca and you can vote for the orca's name. Fantastic. What does that have to do anything with the game? Nothing. It's just fun. But we're not going to be petting our adopted orca. That's going to be somewhere in a sanctuary. We're going to be playing this game that we know nothing about. Even these videos, these 2 videos, are friends of the creator talking about their experience. I mean, honestly, thank you so much to Gnarly Carly, because that is how I'm getting most of the information from this game. Like, that is how I'm getting any sense of what this game is and how this game plays. I didn't get any sense of this from this one. It says unpaid promotion because it's just like a trailer. It doesn't really tell me anything that isn't on the Kickstarter page. And what's on the Kickstarter page is like surface level at best. And I also think perhaps they think that the rulebook isn't necessary because it is more of a family weight game, right? But yeah, thank God for Carly, which I'm sure I've said more than once in my life, because this actually tells you anything that there is about the game, and actually was able for me to get any reasons about gameplay, any feeling of gameplay. So go watch that if you are interested in this game. If you haven't watched this and you're backing, you should not be. That is essential viewing because it gives just the briefest look at what's kind of going on. And that's just because Carly is friends with one of the first people running the campaign, and they brought over the prototype. And Carly's like, okay, I'll talk about the prototype. I'll talk about the experience that you're developing, since you don't seem to want to do it on your own page. Kickstarter is not a new thing in board gaming. These people are also not new to kickstarting board game. There is no reason in this day and age to not launch your Kickstarter with a rulebook on the page. There isn't. Think about all the things you have to put together for a Kickstarter to launch. Why are we still waiting for people to put rulebooks? Why are we still waiting for people to tell us how to play the game? For us to be able to look at the game? And sometimes that can be partly excused if it's a game with a lot of minutia. I'm thinking about the Elder Scrolls. I mean, this was my reason on the Elder Scrolls too, and they've put out now a 100-page rulebook, which I think is also important information if you're getting into that. If that intimidates you, right? If you see something in there that will be part of the learning process that gives you a barrier to learning or doesn't gel with you, I think that is really important information as a consumer, and there's absolutely no reason for this campaign to even have considered launching without having one on the campaign page. It's inexcusable at this point. Kickstarter has been doing board gaming for at least 10 years, and as a pre-order system for at least 5, and it is just completely inexcusable that they don't even have either a rulebook or even a playthrough. Like, they don't show anything. And without Carly just being a friend of them and wanting to talk about the game, right? And like actually tell people about the game or provide a useful thing, we would have just a sketch of how to play. And I think the bar is higher. I think the bar should be higher, especially when they're asking you to pay $100. For me, I'm in Canada. It's going to cost me $109 plus shipping, which is at least $16, $22. Yeah, it'll cost me $130 if I even want to contemplate getting this game. And that is double the cost of any game that I could get in my store, like any of the popular games like Wingspan or Terraforming Mars or whatever. It's sort of 60, 70 average. If you're expecting people to pay upfront this much money and you only give them like 3 paragraphs, I can only assume you are banking most of your hopes off of the IP and making sure that IP tax goes to good use by getting you backers. It's just inexcusable at this point. I know they say it's coming, so great. When it is, I hope it comes in time for me to look at it in my Monday video. Who knows? I've seen campaigns say that it's coming and then it not show up until the very last day. Like, the rulebook not being there in itself is not what the issue is. The issue is not giving your backers enough of a chance to engage with the material. A friend of mine is starting this journalism company. He's been working on it as a passion project, just on it for like 3-4 years, about news with accessible fact checking. Like, publicly accessible primary sources provide the groundwork for all of the articles. And on every assertion made in the article, you can click on it and you can link to that thing and you can look in the document for yourself to see if that is correct. That idea of empowering the reader and empowering the consumer to investigate as much as you want to. And for some people who believe in the product, who believe in Paper Fork Games, who maybe back Cosmoctopus because that's how you can believe in Paper Fork Games with the other only one project that they've done, or if you know them personally, you might believe in this company and just believe and have faith and back on faith of a company. I certainly have done that, and sometimes it's worked out, sometimes it hasn't. But for the general consumer, or somebody who's being brought in from the video game world, not giving the consumer the tools that they need or the access to the things that can put them at ease, the access to the things that can prove that this will be a good experience for them and that it isn't just a sketch, right? That it isn't just a sketch that could change in development. Again, I've had games that I've backed that completely change what they're putting forward. They even say, listen, the rules that you read, we're changing them all and we're making a whole new game. Thanks for your money. Uh, like these things can happen. And so then, well, hey, what can you do? But I think the evidence of a rule book and the evidence of people playing the game and testing the game and talking about the game are important. And if you don't show evidence of that, if you don't show the social proof of that, if you don't show the that you believe in this product enough to write the rules down, to show them off, that you believe in this product enough to say, hey, this is what the game's going to look like. Could you consider backing us? Could you consider giving us some money? If you only want to be like, here's a sketch of what it might look like. Gimme. That isn't enough for me personally. So that's why I harp about the rulebook so much. And that is the way that I learn. That is the way that I engage with the actual stuff. And so maybe that's the same way you engage as well. It's inexcusable at this point. And like cancel your pledge until that rule book is up. And then read it and decide for yourself if this is a game that you will enjoy or not. Or wait for Monday on Crowdfunding Countdown, because then I'll read it for you. Fine, I'll do it. I've done it for the last 2,000 campaigns, and I'm going to continue to do it. Anyway, those are my 5 reasons. Those are the 5 reasons you shouldn't back. I also think that your excitement could be high enough that you don't care about any of this. You love Relogic. You know that they've backed this company. You know that they've got a hand in the development. And you just love Terraria so much that you want it on your shelf. And I think like that is also completely legit. And I hope you love it. I hope you absolutely. That was a double absolutely. It was an absolutely love it. Because that's how excited I am for you. But if you're on the fence or you're in that sort of Kickstarter backing trend, this is your moment to slow down and say, hey, is this really going to be everything that you want and more? Or do you already have something like it on your shelf? I don't know. But thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I really do appreciate in these videos dropping your opinions down in the comments as well, because it provides a really lovely aggregate of reasons why people should back and reasons why people should avoid. Generally, I wish I had more information behind this, behind mechanically, to actually like dive into things. And I think the fact that I don't have enough information to actually like poke apart what the game loop of the game is actually going to be, and that I'm just kind of guessing at it, stresses me out a bit. And that's reason number 0. Chris is stressed he doesn't have enough information. But yeah, I really want to hear your voices and see why you're excited or why you're not. Because I think that also works as a really lovely resource for everybody out there considering. So let's build this community, let's support each other, and let's make sure that everybody gets something that they are super excited to play. Thanks for watching. My name is Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase. Oh, and that's just what a horrible way to end. But at least I may not have a catchphrase, but at least I've got a rule book. It's called Learning to Live with Chris George, and it is 1,000 pages plus. Nobody wants to read it, but it is essential for any time I meet somebody new. I say, this is what I'm like. Do you like it? Or would you rather, skip on to the next one? I guess we'll find out.